Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Coaches of QT2 Systems podcast series. I'm Reem Jishi, the content director with QT2, and our featured coach today is QT2 Run coach, Jack Pilla. Welcome, Jack.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So when we were chatting earlier, and I asked you to tell your story, you're like, I just run, right? So we're going to talk about running, lots and lots of running today. So before we kind of get into your history, I just want you to talk a little bit about how you came to QT2 Run, which was at the time, it was the run formula. So if you could just give us your quick story about how you came to join us.
Yeah. I joined the Run Formula as a coach in 2017, but have been coaching on my own since 2009. And it was going great. But I really never had people, other coaches to talk to. And at that time, I was doing a lot of ultra coaching and there really wasn't a lot of information. So I got recruited by two friends that were coaches for QT2 and the Run Formula. And at that time, they just started a new trail running division. And I thought that was a great mix for me to jump into that and have other people to talk to, other coaches.
All
So
right. So I think you mentioned, I mean, in that answer, you talked about ultra and trail. So that's your area of focus, right?
it seems to be, although, I mean, I run any distance from 5K on up, and I've been coaching other athletes that run from 5K and up to 200 milers. So I'm all over the place. But it seems like most people are coming to me looking for some kind of ultra or trail running coach um, since I've had the experience.
Yeah.
So.
So have you, just kind of out of curiosity in the past, well, let's say the past 20 years, what changes have you seen in the trail running world?
Obviously, there's a lot more trail runners out there. There's a lot of races out there, but in the States, it's limited as far as the number of athletes that can run it. So the races are continually getting closed out now. So you really have to plan almost a year in advance for a lot of these races, and that's tough. Um,
Yeah.
in Europe, they have entrance lists that may be thousands compared to hundreds in the States. Um,
Why is that? Do you think that, I mean, why are the races limited in size so much?
Most of it has to do with the permit process here. And it seems like, in the States, it's not as open and receptive to these races, although in Europe, they love having the longer races there. And I don't know why, but they do.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me, let's talk about you as as a runner. When did you start being interested in running?
Um, Probably really started around 2001. Uh, I had a friend who had some free passes to Vermont City Marathon, and we were skiing up at Tuckerman's Ravine at the time, and he said, "Hey, you want to run the marathon?" And at that point, I was not a runner. I was a skier and a biker. So I said, "Yeah, why not?" And the marathon always intrigued me. Um, but I didn't know if I was running the relay or the whole marathon, and he didn't know yet either. But this was April, so I had 4 weeks to train for what could have been a marathon.
Oh, okay.
So I trained really hard, didn't know what I was doing. Come marathon day, I find out that I'm just going to run the first two legs of the marathon. And I said,
Okay.
fine. So I did that and then decided just to keep going. So as a bandit, I ran the full Vermont City Marathon. And just before the finish line, I was a little worried because I was trapped in all the fencing and I didn't know how to get out. But then I saw a little opening and I just jumped out at the last minute. So, so it hurt a lot. And my IT band flared up at mile 13 and I just kept going and bowled through it. And I think I did like a 3:29 marathon. Um,
Okay.
so, and I hurt a lot for like 4 weeks after that. I said, this is not the way to run a marathon. but it kind of sparked something inside me. And I said, if I could do that with 4 weeks training, well, what if I actually trained?
Right?
So that
I
was
mean,
kind of
that's
the,
something. So you had the option of getting out after half marathon and you just said, why not? I'm just going to keep on going. I feel great. Let me just keep going.
and not only, well, after halfway through, I was hurting pretty bad. That's when the IT band kicked in, but
Yeah.
I just pulled through because, I like to finish things that I start.
Okay.
So,
Okay. So, all right. So you did that. You made it through.
so
Then
then
what
I trained, and my goal was then to try to, get my time down as low as I could do it. Um, and I think over a 3 year period, I finally got to be under 3 hours, and that was like a huge goal of mine, and that was big.
Yeah.
Okay, I could do this. But meanwhile, I was starting to train for the ultra marathons. So I think in 2004, I did my first 50 miler. And I said, well, I could do 50. Well, why not do 100? So then next year I was doing hundreds. So, but,
Why not?
throughout the process, I was still doing, 5K races, 10K races, part of a local running club here in the Burlington area. So I had my fast friends to train with, and then I had ultra people to train with. So I had all different spectrums, which was a great mix.
Yeah, so when you say I just run, you were like, you're serious. You just run fast, long, easy, trail, road, whatever, whatever's thrown at you. That's great. So I find it though so interesting, like the move from the marathon to trail, I mean to ultra isn't just about increasing your distance. It's a whole different feel to it though, isn't it? I mean, road racing and huge road races versus the
Yeah, I
nature.
mean, it got to be like in the big road races, the runners seemed to be very uptight. And I'd be running a marathon, having fun and trying to talk to some of these people, and they didn't want to talk to me. But then, you go into a trail race and people are just yakking all the time. I mean, you're also going at a slower pace so you can talk easier. But it just seemed to be a friendlier crowd at that time.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. So, all right. So you did the marathons, you kept going, went up to the 100. Do you have a favorite distance?
Probably the hundreds I like the best.
Okay.
Um, Although it's a lot of training, a lot of time to prepare if you want to do it well. And
Mhm.
I kind of had standards for myself. I was doing well in these hundreds. So now it's a lot harder going back, and I know I can't run as hard or as fast as I used to, but now I've reset goals um,
Mhm.
for my age and abilities, and I still like to chase the youngins, but
Yeah.
I'm not a threat anymore to them.
Yeah. I know. I was just having this conversation the other day that it's hard not to like compare yourself to your former self, but be the best that you can be today, right?
Yeah.
That's so, yeah.
And I
So,
think because of my age, I also attract some of the older athletes too.
mhm,
They like to see that there's an older person out there still competing, still being active, and they want to be able to do that as well.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a lifestyle decision. And hopefully you can run for as long, and just keep on going. So, all right. So you said that you started running in 2001 and then you started coaching in 2009. How did you make that decision to start coaching?
Um, at that time, I was probably at my peak, and I was doing really well in a lot of the ultra races and winning some. So I would have people come up to me and say, "Hey, I want to run like you. Teach me." So, and it took me a little while, and finally I gave in and said, "Okay, let's do it." And um, I didn't have all the training at the time, the official training, but I had set myself up sort of as a guinea pig throughout the process of training for these races. and kind of figured out what worked, what didn't work. And then I went and got certified through the Road Runners Club of America and USATF, and figured out that, hey, some of the principles that I was training by is actually the right way to do it. Um, and
That's
then
good.
just kind of said, okay, yeah, that worked. That's why.
Okay.
So I kind of educated myself in the process, and then just started picking up more and more athletes to coach.
Mhm.
So
So while you were, I mean, running on your own, did you never worked with a coach?
no, I think
No.
I'd be coachless. I don't think I'm coachable. I
Well, you
probably
coach
would be.
yourself and
And, as an athlete, I mean, I pushed myself really, really hard. And I don't think I've ever trained anyone as hard as the way I trained myself. And I tried. And the first guy I was coaching, his nickname for me was Satan.
oh,
Um,
okay.
but I coached him, I think, for like 5 years, and he was getting some really good results. So, he worked hard and it paid off for him. So
Yeah. See, that's pretty funny. You're in trouble now that I know that name.
but when I start working with athletes, I really look at their past running history, see what they've done, and try to map out where I think I can improve on what they've been doing and make them better.
Mhm.
So I mean that's kind of my philosophy. I need to listen and evaluate
Yeah.
and see where I can hopefully get them to improve.
Okay. So how do you I mean when you're looking at trail running, some of the numbers, I guess, aren't as pure as they are on the road. I mean, like pacing on the trail is a lot harder, I think, to pull in. How so when you write workouts for people, how do you let them know what they're supposed to be doing? Like, how do you describe that in your workouts?
I mean, it's not a lot different than a road runner. I mean, I have hard workouts, I've got easy workouts, and I try to keep the cycle going hard and easy so they can recover. And recovery, whether you're running roads or trails, is going to be the same, and it helps rebuild the body so you're stronger for the next hard workout.
Mhm.
So really, the philosophies are the same. And for trail running, a lot of people think, well, I don't need to do speed work. Well, I make them all do speed work because that gets the leg turnover going, gets their heart rate up a lot more than just running hills all day. So I find you've got to do a mix of whether it's road running or trail running. You got to throw in the speed work, you have to throw in the hill work. It all makes for the stronger, better athlete.
Okay. So
and
how do
and
you
especially the hill work. I mean, this is one of my big things, and I always tell everyone hills are your friends. If you can run hills well, you can do anything. And something like the Boston Marathon, it's all about downhill training. And so many people forget to downhill train for Boston, and they feel great for the first 5 miles, but by a mile 18 or 20, their quads are spent and they're walking.
yeah, yeah,
Meanwhile, all my ultra friends are cruising up the hills having the best time at mile 20.
yeah. I know Boston's tough with the way it starts, and it's almost not noticeable, but it goes on and on and
Yeah,
on,
yeah.
at the beginning there. Do you
And
ever
that's why
have
as a trail runner, and with all my downhill training, Boston was my marathon PR. And
really?
that was in the middle of a 100-mile training cycle for an ultra I was doing later on. And I jumped into Boston, didn't really taper at all, and just ran it, had a ball, and felt great, and had my marathon PR.
Wow. And what was that PR?
2:43,
Nice. Yeah,
and
that's
I don't know how I ever did that, and that was 1 month or 2 months before I turned 50 years old.
very impressive. That's- So the key is to having a successful Boston, train for an ultra, have
And
fun,
just
don't take it too seriously.
exactly. Well,
Yeah.
I was also distracted during that marathon. That was the year Lance Armstrong was running it. It was 2008. And at that
Mm,
time, he was still well-known positive athlete at the time, and he started out in the corral in front of me. So my goal was to find and run with Lance the entire race. And it
Uh-huh.
got to the finish line, and I didn't really care about anything. Going, where's Lance? And they said he hasn't finished yet. So I chased him down the whole race, never saw him. Uh,
How did
and
you not see him? Didn't he have like a whole entourage with him?
that's what I thought.
That's pretty funny. Did you ever
Yeah,
find him? No.
no, no.
Okay.
I think he crashed and burned a little. He didn't do as well as he thought he would.
Yeah. Well, I mean, isn't that something that you can be so successful at one sport and not at another? You do have to find your
Yeah.
sport. So that's cool. So do you ever deal from a trail running perspective with the person who trips over their feet, like on the rocks and roots, and
I'm one of those.
you are one of those? Okay.
Yes, I fall a lot. I've got scars all over my body, and we're out with some friends last night, and we're all like talking about our different falls and our scars, and yes.
Yeah.
And um, as a trail runner, you're gonna fall. It's just part of it. And I teach tuck and roll, the tuck and
Okay.
roll method,
Mhm.
which doesn't always work if you're in a really rocky section, but a lot of times it can save you.
Oh,
So
yeah. I used to say that as a bike racer, like because you can't race bikes without being willing to crash. And I was like, the reason I never got hurt really bad bike racing was I was really good at the tuck and roll. I just would fly over my bike and go into a ball. And that one of my teammates was a baseball player and she landed like this. That was a much bigger
oh,
problem. Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Rock and roll. Yep. That's too funny. So you can tell all your stories and remember your days by just looking at the scars on your body, and there you
Yeah.
go. All right. So talk to me a little bit about the athletes that you work with at QT2.
Um, I've been working with a whole range of athletes. I've got one guy who was a barefoot runner out of Chicago and doing races anywhere from 5K to a half marathon, and that was it for him. He was an older athlete, so during the pandemic, he actually PR'd in like every distance. He was in his mid 60s and was getting PRs for every distance from 5K, 10K, 10-mile, half marathon. So that's at one end. And then I've got some other athletes that are kind of like me and just run, run, run. Um, and didn't always believe in themselves, but we got them on a good training program. And then they started really improving their placement and getting on the podium. So, I've got the whole spectrum of runners, different distances, uh, and different ages. And I think some of the younger runners, they look at some of the races that I've done and they go, "Oh, I want to do those races," and they hook up with me as a coach to get them ready for those races because I've been there.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So what are some of your favorite races that you've done?
probably the Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc, UTMB in Europe. I
Mhm.
did that one in 2011. Went over there all by myself. Had never been outside of the United States or Canada, and just got on a plane and went to run the UTMB. Stayed in a hostel. Didn't know anyone. And just had the time of my life and had an incredible run. During the race, I have never really knew where I was. They had changed the course a couple of times because of bad weather. And at one point, I get to an aid station and say, "How far do we have left to go?" And they'd say, 50K. I said, "Great, only 50K to go." I'd run for another 5 hours, get to another aid station. "How far do we have to go?" 50K. So I never really knew where I was at during the race. And by the time I crossed the finish, I mean, it was great. And um, there was no one there. It was middle of the night, I don't know, 1, 2 in the morning. And I saw one person there who was a reporter on the ultra scene from the US. And she says, Jack, you did great. I go, really? Well, how did I do? She goes, well, you came in 22nd overall. And this is out of like 2,500 people. I
Mhm.
go, wow, I can live with that.
Yeah.
And there were some huge American names in that race too. They called
Mhm.
it the Tour de France of running that year. And pretty much all the favorite US runners had dropped out. And I was the third athlete from the US to finish. So
Wow.
that was a spectacular race, and it was just a lot of fun.
So how many K did you end up running actually that day?
I think
Yeah.
it ended up being about 105 miles. The
Okay.
weather was so bad that they delayed the race. Usually it starts at 6 at night, and it didn't start till like 11 or 11:30 at night. So we had to keep waiting for some
Mm.
big storm to at least partially go through, because it was pouring down below and snowing, blizzarding up top. So it was quite the extreme in weather.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
Yeah, but
that
that
was,
was a great experience. And since then, um, I've been over there, I think, another 4 times. It's the Chamonix area of France,
mhm,
um, and parts of Italy. So it's just spectacular over there.
yeah.
So, so that's one of my favorite races. In the States, Hard Rock is another one, and I try to do races with views. I don't want to do loopy courses. I want to do races with incredible views. So Hard
Okay.
Rock was another one like that.
I mean, there's some amazing ones out there. I guess I can never understand the ones who are like, okay, here's your 2 mile loop. How many times can you do it in 24 hours? Like that's not
That
as
would drive
fun.
me crazy.
Yeah.
And I did this one race. It was called the Burning River in Ohio. And it's a fast course, but there was so much of it on a towpath that I
Mhm.
got so bored at times that I was just walking. I didn't know what to do, just to try to break it up a little. They had some really fun trail sections, but too much of the towpath.
Yeah.
So I want to see things.
Yep. And so this year, I know you have a few athletes that you're training for the Vermont 100, which is another, I mean, that's a pretty spectacular race. Have you have you been when you, I mean, that's a race where there's horses on the trail at the same time, right? As the runners.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what's that like when you're out there and
It's kind of fun running with the horses, especially at nighttime, because a lot of them put lights on the horses. So it's
Mhm,
just fun to see them. And I mean, you've got to respect the horses and listen to the rider and follow
mhm,
their instructions so you don't spook them. But usually those horses are pretty used to people. Um, and during the race, they take care of the horses better than they do humans. I mean, they
mhm.
have required stops and they've got to be there for so long and make sure they're in good health.
Okay. And the humans, you're on
Uh,
your own. You do what you need
they
to
could
do.
be on the side of the trail puking their guts out, and that's okay.
No, I hope not.
But I mean, the
I'm
Vermont 100 is a fun race. There's a lot of good support. I've run it 5 times, and I've probably gone to help other runners another, I don't know, 5 or 10 times. So I'm very connected to that race.
So as you just mentioned that you've gone to help some runners, one thing that I want to talk to you about is you as a pacer. I mean, so you're a runner, you're a coach, but you spend a lot of time working as a pacer as well, right?
I do, yeah.
So how did you do you remember your first pacing experience or how you got into to being a pacer?
Well, I was recruited to be the pace team coordinator for Vermont City Marathon, probably back, I don't know, 2009, 2010. Um, so I had to figure out, okay, let's get a crew together and we have to figure out how to pace. And at that time, I figured out 26.2 miles, you want to run a certain time, you just figure out the pace per mile. Well, I kind of goofed that first year and not figuring out that the course you run is actually like 26.5 miles. So if you run it by the exact pace for 26.2, you're going to end up a couple of minutes short. And that's what happened that first year. So I learned a lot.
Yeah.
But I didn't actually pace it. I just ran it. My typical race day is I get all my pacers to the start line, and if they all show up and I don't have to fill in, then I get them settled, then run out, get my stuff, run to the start line, and then I can go run the race. Um, and then after the race, I'd go and help some of the groups bring people in. But there's been a few times where I've had to sub. Once was the night before one of my pace leaders got sick, so I had to fill in for him. And then a couple other years on course, I had to jump in and take over. So,
On course. What
well,
happened to the pacer?
well, and this was last year, and I just happened to be a little bit behind this group, just running by myself, and I came across one of the pace leaders on the side, and going, "What's going on?" He goes, "Oh, my legs are dead. I'm done." So he hands me the sign, and I go running up, and then like 200 yards up, I see we always have two pace leaders per group, and I
Mhm.
see the other pace leader on the side all cramped up. So I said, "Give me your sign." So I'm running with two signs, and trying to make sure I'm on track to get in on time.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, mile before the finish, the cramped up pace leader comes running by, sprinting up to me, goes, "I'm all set now. Give me the sign." So he jumped back in.
So he regrouped and okay.
Yeah, and
So
we
I'm
got in
curious.
just where we were supposed to be.
To go.
And as a pace leader, our goal is to come in by chip time, usually 30 seconds to a minute under our
Okay.
goal time. So
So
that's
how do you do that though when the course isn't flat? I mean, Vermont City is not a flat course. I mean, so do you do it by effort? Do you figure it out by like just what the elevation profile is, or do you just try to hold the same
we
pace?
we try to hold the same pace throughout, but if there are a couple of key hills, then we may slow down a little going up and then speed up a little afterwards.
Okay.
But our goal really is to do an even pace as often as we can, making some adjustments.
And then what do you do with like rest stops? I mean, with aid stations, do you stop at them? Do you just grab and go, or what's your
You mean
approach
for
on?
like a marathon?
Yeah.
The faster runners usually are experienced enough to grab a cup and just keep going. They may slow down a hair. Some of the slower pace groups will actually stop and walk through,
Okay.
and they have enough time to do that.
Yeah.
And some of the slower groups we go down to like a 5:30 for um, total time, 5 hours and 30 minutes. So they're going slower so they can afford to stop and walk, and they may be doing run, walk anyway to keep
Mhm.
that pace going.
Got
Um,
it.
I had to pace the Adirondack Marathon last year at a 5:15 pace, which was quite challenging. But I found some people to run with, which took my mind off of it and made it more fun for me. Uh,
So
because
what, sorry, go
at
ahead.
Vermont City, I had to jump into the 3:30 pace group. So
Oh,
I'm
that's what
all
I was
over.
just gonna ask. What was that? I seem to remember it was one of the quicker ones. So you just jumped in, you're like, okay, I'll just pace the 3:30 marathon. And
Yeah.
that was,
So yeah, so that's part of my job as pace team coordinator. I need to be able to fill in whenever and
yeah,
whatever group.
that's quite the extreme though. I don't know. I'm sure if someone told me you need to go in and pace at 3:30 tomorrow, I would not be able to do that. So that's quite the skill.
Yeah,
So
and the runners really appreciate it. And when we cross the finish line, we might not have a lot of runners with us because at the end, if they're feeling really good, we'll encourage them. Well, if you feel great, kick it in and go. You
yeah,
don't need us anymore. We brought you to this point. It might be like mile 22 or 23. Go for it.
yeah. Yeah. So I mean, as a pacer though, do you, if someone's not feeling good, I mean, do you do anything, or is your just goal like you're just going to hold the pace, and if they're with you, they're with you, and if they're not,
Yeah, as a pace leader, you've got a job to do and you've got to stay on task.
Yeah.
and you can advise them as much as you can. And if they're not feeling great, they may drop back to the next group, just run a little bit slower and wait for the next group to catch up to them. And that happens a lot.
Yeah.
People are a little ambitious in the beginning, and maybe they're not in the group that they should be, but they want to try, and then they fall back and they may jump in with the group behind.
Hmm. Yeah. It's always easier to run with people though. That's for sure.
Yes.
I mean, the
Yeah,
company is helpful. So, and you also though pace in ultras too, right?
we do. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a whole different way of pacing too. You're very much there for emotional support and to keep them moving. So if they're on the side and they're hunched over or maybe puking, you got to get them going again, which not is not always very easy.
You have some of your go-to dig deep phrases that you use.
And depending on the race, you can pace at different parts of the race. Like for Vermont 100, a pacer can start at mile 70 and just run the last 30 with them. Some of the longer ones, I helped a friend at the Cocodona 250 last year, and I think we started pacing, it might have been like mile 75 or 80 as well. And we had a number of us jumping in, taking turns, but I ended up pacing with her for 92 miles over 48 hours. And it was quite challenging at the end as she's starting to have her mind wander a bit, keeping her on track, making sure she's eating and drinking. So that's a big part of it, and not getting lost.
Yeah, I'm 250 miles. So you paced for 48 hours. So how long was she out there?
Um, well, I didn't pace for 48 hours. It was over a
Yeah,
48
I mean,
hour
over
period.
48
But
hours.
I
Yeah.
think she did that one in, it was like 75 hours.
Wow. So when you
Yeah.
have a race that's that long, I mean, do you stop and sleep or do you, I mean, how do you keep going for that long?
That's
Sorry, this is like so foreign to me, so I'm just
yeah,
curious.
that's the tough part. Figuring out when or if they need to sleep and what's the breaking point. That we had her first trying to sleep at I think 43 hours into it. But the problem is the athlete's body could rest, but their brain is still going, so they can't sleep. Um, so I think during that whole 75 hours, maybe she slept a few hours. That was it. Um, but then I helped her at another race in the fall, the Bigfoot 200. And that one she did, I think, in like 60 hours or maybe under. And at that one, she didn't sleep at all. She again tried to sleep at like 40 some odd hours into it, but the brain was just, no, you're not sleeping. So there's
Mhm.
like kind of that breakoff point. How far can you go? And her mind was still intact at 60 hours into it. So anything more than that, she probably would have needed some sleep. Um, and back in, was it 2013, I ran the Tour de Giants in Italy, which is 206 miles and was it 78,000 feet of climbing, 78,000 feet of descending. So that one takes a little bit longer. That took me 110 hours to do. And probably during that period, I slept maybe 8 hours. So with little naps here and there. The body will tell you when it's time to sleep.
Right. And hopefully the mind cooperates with that. That's wow. That's amazing. And then, I mean, for the trail races, they're not like obvious, like big city marathons where you're supposed to go. So, I mean, you're looking for what, like flags on the trees and stuff to guide you, or how are you making sure that you stay on course?
Um, the courses aren't always marked that well. And I've been lost many times, but now they're starting to put the race so you can download it onto your high-tech watch. And
Right.
if you go off course, your watch will tell you. I haven't
Okay.
figured out how to do that yet, but it does work. So, but I think that's also you're relying so much on technology that technology can fail too.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
during the peak of all my racing, the only watch I used was a Timex. That was it.
Mhm.
With a little stopwatch, and that was it.
I know those ones used to crack me up. They'd be like Iron Man. I'm like, and what do you do that's helping with that? I mean, it's just a stopwatch, so it lasts longer. I don't know, but I mean, so how do you? I mean, how do you know you're off course? I mean, you get off course. At what point are you like, okay, well, this doesn't feel right, or the trail ends, or like, how do you know that you're not where you're supposed to be?
Sometimes you have no idea, but there should be course markings every so often. So if you've been running for a half hour and you haven't seen anything, then it's up. I may be off course, and you may just be standing there waiting to hopefully see someone. But especially in the States, there's not a lot of people in these races. There could be 300 runners, so you might not see anyone for quite a while. So then you have to turn around and go back, because the rule is if you're lost, you've got to go back from where you got lost and restart your race there. You can't like do a shortcut through the woods and hope you find
Yeah.
it.
I can't even imagine. I mean, so you're like, you're going out there, you're looking for flags. You haven't seen one for a while. You're like, okay, I must be lost. I mean, have you ever had the point where you've turned around and then realized you were supposed to be where you were and had to double back to it? Or,
I know I've backtracked some,
yeah,
and then someone may come along and then I know if I'm on the trail or not. But I've had others where I've, been out there and just praying that I'm on the trail.
yeah,
And the mile distance isn't always accurate either.
sure.
I was at one race and I thought it was a 100-mile race, and I get to a marker in mile 99 and going, great, there's only a mile to go. Well, a mile goes by, I'm still in the deep woods, and I knew kind of what the finish looked like. And I get out on this road and I couldn't really tell if it was going up or going down, but I knew I needed to go down, and didn't see any markers for like miles. And I was, standing in the road trying to make that decision. Do I go back? Do I go forward? And just kept going, and then finally saw a marker. And the race, I think, ended up being like 104 miles. And I thought it was
Oops.
100. So that,
Yeah,
whoop. But, in trail running, it is what it is.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
it's not like a USATF certified course, whatever.
Mhm. But the mystique, I mean, you keep coming back, you're doing this, you coach
It's
people,
always an
you
adventure.
face people. Yeah, okay. That's
Yeah,
fair.
I could tell stories from pretty much every ultra that I've done.
Yeah, oh, that's fun. You should write a book on it. And that would be Jack
Right.
Scott. It'd be really interesting. Seen
I've
some,
given some talks. I had to do one in New Hampshire, inspired living. They had me come down and chat with a group of people down there.
mhm,
Um, and then I also do coaching at the Craftsbury Outdoor Center.
okay.
They have some running camps in the summer, and I do a couple of sessions in the summer out there, and they usually have me do a little talk too. And I've got a
Oh,
little PowerPoint presentation of some of the fun places I've been to.
yeah, yeah. Lots of good stories. So I'm curious with all these, you just hop in, pay someone for, 90 some miles and drop in and do a, 3:30 marathon because the pacer dropped out. How many miles do you run a week? Like, I mean, I'm sure that there's a range, but sort of what's your low and high point throughout your career of what you've done?
Usually my maintenance running, I'll be doing like 50 miles a week. And then peak training for a 100-miler, I don't do as much as I used to, but I used to have a 30-day window before I tapered where I tried to do 500 miles. And that was kind of my goal. And then I could taper and I would feel ready for the 100-miler.
So after you've done 500, okay, 500 miles in a month, so over 100 miles a week you're
Yeah.
doing for a month. How long of a taper do you need before your legs are feeling good after that kind of volume?
Usually it's a gradual 3-week taper.
Okay.
Whereas in like a regular road marathon, it might be two, but with the ultras with all the distance and volume you've done, I like to do a 3-week taper. And that's what I usually have my athletes doing too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you,
That
you want to
makes
be rested by the time you get there, but you want to make sure you're not overly rested.
Mhm. I know, right? There's that. There's
It's that
definitely
fine line.
no. Yeah, but I guess if you have to pick, more rest is better than less rested if you don't get it quite right.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And I
And
think,
when I'm working with my athletes as far as volume, um, for the ultra races, I like to get them to do as much as possible as their body can handle. But there's the fine line between training hard and overtraining. And as a coach, that's really what I'm watching for. And everyone has a different fine line of where their limits are. So,
yeah,
I watch their runs on, we use the training peaks, which is great because I can see what they're doing. I can see how they're performing. And, I can chat with them and see how they're feeling and then make a decision. Do we need to cut back or are we good?
yeah. Yeah, so I mean, when you have, so you put the workouts into Training Peaks and they download their watch and give you some comments and stuff on there. So are there certain things that you're looking out for if you're like worried that someone is not handling the volume or overtraining?
Heart rate is a great indicator. And it was funny before I started coaching with QT2 or the run formula, I never did any heart rate training. I never even really cared. It was always by effort. So then I had to figure out, all right, you guys, QT2 was really big on heart rate training. So I had to try to figure that out and see where I was with my heart rate training. And as it turns out, all the zones where I was supposed to be, I was. So running by effort for all these years, I just knew where I needed to be with my body.
Yeah.
Um, and so with athletes, I try not to have them glued to their watch at all, but it's a great tool for me to see what they're doing. I could see, yes, they're doing their hard workout on this hard workout day. Or if they're running too hard on their easy day, I can see that and say, hey, you're running too hard today.
Hmm.
So for me, it's a great coaching tool.
Hmm. Yeah, I know those numbers, they're real. You get it like, "Oh, a little high there."
Yes.
Um, I mean, so working with people, I mean, and obviously I've coached people for so many years and different levels and experiences. And over that time, I'm sure you've heard, I don't know if I can do this. I mean, it's got to be right. So how do you bring the athlete back who is worried that they're not able to do something?
Um, I try to find their positives, see what they're strong at, what their strengths are, and kind of work off of that, and then try to make them stronger in some of their weaker areas. And I try not to talk too much about it, but once they start getting some more positive results, I go, hey, here's what your training did for you. And when they
Mhm.
start having better results, then they're like, yeah, it worked. And then they give a more positive attitude towards themselves.
Mhm.
Um, had one runner who I've been working with for a while, and she never believed she could compete with the top athletes. And after working with her for a number of years and seeing her results and getting her on the podium, I think she finally believed in herself that yeah, she does belong there.
Yeah,
So that was a lot of fun.
yeah, that is a lot of fun. I mean, as coaches, I think that we see athletes' potential sometimes before they appreciate that they can get there. So
And even
yeah,
taking an athlete, maybe they're a back of the pack athlete, get them to be a mid pack can be a huge success too. And they know that they can, see they're in the middle now instead of dragging behind.
yeah,
So that can be equally as satisfying.
yeah. So in like, I mean, marathons and large triathlons, you can track runners while they're going, but you can't do that, right? In an ultra, or do
Some you
they?
can,
Some you
you
can.
can,
Okay.
yeah. A lot of the races, especially if you're in remote areas, they require you to carry some kind of a tracking device,
Okay.
which they're not super accurate, but you can kind of see where they are, especially if you need to meet them on course somewhere.
Hmm. Okay. So how do you like if you have an athlete that's racing, what are your feelings? Are you anxious for them? Are you just
Oh yeah,
what,
I might be up all night long, like getting up, looking on the computer to see where they are, where their placement is. I do
mhm,
that quite often.
yeah. So when they call you to tell you how they did, you already know how they did. You have
Well,
like,
usually once they finish and I see it, I'll send them like a text immediately
yeah,
congratulating
yeah, yeah.
them.
They know, yeah, they know you're watching. So do you do you have as a coach, do you have a philosophy that you follow or a approach that we haven't talked about yet?
Um, I think just really to listen and evaluate and communicate. Um, the athletes that do better, I would say, are the ones that communicate with me more often. And that might be just through a message on Training Peaks or an email or a text, just so I know how they're feeling. You know, I can watch them on Training Peaks all the time, but you don't always see what's going on either. So I think communication really is the key. So
Yeah,
that's one of my big philosophies, just you got to communicate.
yeah. No, for sure, because the numbers only, they don't mean anything in a vacuum. I mean, you need the commentary around them. So,
Yeah. And I've got a lot of the athletes, they do put comments on there and "Oh, I'm really tired today. And if they're tired for another day or two, then I may cut back some of their training so they get some rest.
mhm,
So that's the big part of being the coach.
yeah, yeah, it's not just, okay, here's your plan. You get to respond and change and,
Yeah.
make sure it keeps working for them.
And that's why I like the one-on-one coaching versus the mission plan. The mission plan is good for some athletes that have very good discipline, but I've seen so many that just fall behind and never catch up again.
Hmm.
So that can be frustrating.
Yeah,
So if I see that, I tend to jump in on those mission plan people and say, "Hey, what's going on?"
yeah,
Because I do
yeah.
still watch them.
Yeah, I know. I do too, more than I should sometimes. So yeah, but I know it's hard because you want to be able to help them make sure that they stay on track. And it's, you miss a day, that's not a big deal. But when the day turns into two, turns into five, turns into 2 weeks, and you just can't pick up where you left off. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's that's fun. So anything that you want to talk about that haven't brought up, any parting words?
Mm, I don't think so. I think I'm good.
Just
Um,
running?
a couple other little sayings that I like. One is impossible is nothing. And that's sort of been my motto forever. And then the other is if you want to run fast, you have to run fast.
Yeah. Possible. I like that. Impossible is nothing. I haven't heard that one before. It's no such thing, huh?
That's right.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And
So,
then did I tell you about my run streak?
no, no, we haven't said that before we got on. No, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Um, I've had this streak going on now for it'll be 18 years in June where I've run every day and it's just at least a mile. Um, but it's accumulated to I think over 66,000 miles in that time frame. But the 1 mile a day is not the hard one. The other one is I've got to run a 20-mile day at least once a week, and that's been going on as long as the 1 mile a day. So if you're sort of injured or not feeling great or middle of the winter when it's below zero, that one is the tough one to get in a 20-mile day.
so I mean, I've known a lot of people who've had run streaks, maybe not for 18 years, but who have, but what prompted you to add that 20-mile once a week? That one I have not heard before.
It's just something that I've always done in my training.
Yeah.
But the whole streak thing, I never even knew I had it until I was like 5 years into it, and I was logging my runs in on running ahead program, and it kept kicking out my runs. And I got in touch with the people at Running Ahead, and I said, "Hey, it's not taking my runs anymore." And he goes, "Have you really been running for 5 years straight?" And I go, "I don't know, probably." So he had to rewrite the software to accommodate
To
streakers.
accommodate 18 years later. There you go.
And so now I feel real guilty. I don't even think about not running. It's
Yeah,
just one of those things like you brush your teeth every day. I run every day.
yeah.
It's just it's a way of life.
It's a
So
way of
and I-
life.
and I
So,
but it's a great motivator to get me out the door because I know if I broke that streak so many times I could say, well, it's nasty out. I don't want to go run. And that'd be really easy to do.
It would be. Do you run on the treadmill at all, or do you just go out for?
Very little. We have one here. A few years ago, I ran on it a little bit more because I fell on the ice and banged my head pretty hard. So I was using it a little bit, but that's
No fun.
no fun. I'd rather be outside.
Yeah. All right. So do you have like any tips for how you run outside when it's icy? Do you put screws on the bottom of your shoes or anything? Put spikes in
Yeah,
or?
we have screw shoes. We just use sheet metal screws and drive them into the lugs of a trail shoe. That's one method. That's the $5 method. I also have a pair of shoes that have spikes embedded in them, like they come that way. And I just
Mhm.
got those this year, and they've been great. I've been very impressed. They have little like a dozen carbon tips in them.
Uh-huh.
And that's good for most ice, but when it gets super, super icy and really steep, then we have micro spikes, which is basically a half-inch steel spike that you strap on your running shoes.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's for traction. And the other is just warm clothes and a lot of layers, because you're sweating, freezing constantly.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. You start out cold, you get too hot, it makes you cold.
yes.
And so,
And a lot of times in training in the winter, I may break it up into two runs so I can come home, change my clothes. It's kind of like an aid station, grab something to eat and then head back out again.
how long do you think you'll keep that streak going?
I don't know. I had a torn hamstring last year and it was really, really difficult to do that, especially the 20-mile day. And I had to deal with my PT and I said, is it okay if I just run 1 mile a day? And she gave into that. She said, okay. But I didn't tell her about the 20-mile thing going for like a month. And then I had to come clean with her one day.
Yeah, I
But those
can't
runs,
imagine she had much good to say.
she just kind of rolled her eyes and I don't think she was that surprised. But
Yeah,
it would take me so long. It was middle of the summer, so I would start runs out at like midnight to avoid the heat in the day. And it might take me 6 hours. It
yeah,
just was not going well. But I got it done.
you got it done. Okay. All right. Jack, it's been so interesting. You have so many great stories to tell. So I think you should write that book, though. Seriously. Well, this was a lot of fun. Thank you for joining the
Yeah.
podcast today and telling your stories and I know you work with such interesting athletes, and so keep on sending those results and everything on.
Yeah, and it's fun watching the athletes progress. And I had one that was having some motivational issues this week, and I told him about my streak thing, and I said, "Huh, you probably think I'm a little nutty, don't you?" And he goes, "Yeah."
Yeah. Keep some perspective on things. Satan.
Well, I like to have fun. I like my runners to have fun too.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, that's what it's all about. If you can't put a smile on your face when you're running, why do it, right? I mean,
that's right.
enjoy it. All right, Jack. Just run, Jack. All right. Thanks very much.
Okay, bye, Reem.
Bye.